the computer. Okay, meeting's being recorded. So thank you for joining us. And today I have the pleasure of introducing retired Colonel Edna Cummings to some parts of our team. And for those who could not make it, this meeting is being recorded for the purposes of understanding how to look at Miss Cummings as a potential partner or client or mentor for all the things that we plan on doing to tell the African American military history of all the things that have not been recorded for the permanent record. Oh, great. Okay, here's Val. That's the person I was looking for. So we'll give Val a few minutes here to join us. But again, it's with my pleasure to introduce, again, retired Colonel Edna Cummings, U.S. Army retired. Okay. So Edna, if you can, just give us as much background. I mean, this is about, us recording as much information about you and to some degree your assets, the things that you believe are assets. And that includes the projects you're currently consulting on, and how they all funnel to the vision you have of I believe you want to do a historically accurate, dramatic, episodic television series. So kind of in that order, give us, the best you can of why we're going to be helping you if we
Well,
can.
Kevin, well, Kevin, I didn't realize that I had a vision until a couple of days ago, and you pulled one out of me. So, first of all, I am retired Army Colonel Edna Cummings. I just dropped my notepad here so I can remember what I'm talking about. Um, and since 2018, I retired from the Army, meaning I served over 20 years and I was able to get a paycheck. That's what it means when you're retired. So, about see, in 2018, I started a project helping an organization raise funds for a monument at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Fort Leavenworth, Kansas is the home of one of the regiments of Buffalo Soldiers, the 10th Regiment. That's where they actually camped. Fort Leavenworth also has a prison, as you may have heard that in popular culture going to Leavenworth. And it also has a fantastic Buffalo Soldier park that honors with statues and monuments African American first. It also has a bust of the first of a white commander who commanded the 10th Regiment of the Buffalo Soldiers, but it did not have any. It did not contain any women. So the project director had commissioned all of these statues through private donations to be on this army installation. So I worked with him in 2018, and that's the website you see, Kevin, the 6888 website. That is that organization's website. I'm not affiliated with that website per se, other than a supporter with the Monument Project. So there's a 6888 monument at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Um, the monument received positive feedback, a lot of praise, and a documentary producer contacted me. He'd produced a documentary about World War I women, the Hello Girls, and asked if I could help him produce a documentary about the black women who served overseas during World War II. And that's what the monument is at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So if you look it up online, it's the 6888th Monument, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. I helped him with the documentary. It's now on Amazon Prime, entitled about 6888. The momentum for the story grew. I had been working with Senator Moran's office. He's a senator from Kansas, on other 6888 recognitions, uh, delayed military honors in terms of a commendation medal, and he had introduced a resolution in Congress to honor the 6888. And this is 2018. The documentary producer and I said, hey, let's do something larger to really give this unit of black women who served in World War II a place in history. So I took on the task of championing the effort to work with Congress to get them the nation's highest civilian award, the Congressional Gold Medal. And that's something else that you can research the history of the Congressional Gold Medal. The first recipient, and it's not a military award, it's a civilian award. The first recipient was General George Washington in 1776 as the leader of the Continental Congress. It's been less than 200 of these awards since 1776. You have people like Charles Schultz, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa receiving these awards from the nation. It's bipartisan, meaning both chambers of Congress have to work together and agree. So I introduced the legislation. I drafted the legislation, and you can look up 6888 Congressional Gold Medal and see a lot of articles about that. Drafted the legislation. Senator Moran introduced it. Representative Gwendolyn Moore from Wisconsin introduced the House bill. It has to be a Senate version, a House version. It took us about 3.5 years to get passed, which is lightning speed to get Congress to pass legislation. I'm not a lobbyist, but I'm an advocate, and this was pre COVID and during COVID and the previous administration. We were able to get enough support in Congress. So that's how powerful this story is. I like to say that for a moment, the 6888 brought the nation together. And the momentum continues to grow, learning about this story. Tyler Perry, I'm not involved with Tyler Perry's project on Netflix towards the holiday season, I believe. A movie will come out on Netflix entitled The 6888. We have a documentary on Amazon Prime entitled The 6888, all about the 855 Black women who served overseas during World War II, who restored vital communication between the troops on the front line and their loved ones on home. And the way they did that, they cleared the mail backlog. It was about 20 plus million pieces of mail post D Day, after D Day, excuse me, I use a lot of military jargon. After D Day, the mail was backlogged, troop morale was plummeting, the war wasn't over, and there was a concern within the armed forces that the troops were losing their will to fight. And so the morale, was very low. And the motto of the 6888 was no male, low morale. And right now, there are only about four of these original women still living. But as I worked through the story, what frustrated me is that not only were Black women never mentioned in context of World War II, there were more than 7,000 Black women on active duty during World War II. And the 6888 is only a slice, about 13% of the Black women who served overseas. You have Black women stationed throughout the US in World War II. You have Black nurses. You had Black Red Cross uh, workers called donut dollies serving overseas because of segregation. It was Jim Crow within the military. So they had to leverage Black talent to serve the Black troops in the hospitals. I mean, you did have some you know, white services, but for the most part, it was segregated. So the unique thing about the 6888, it was the only unit of Black women to serve overseas during World War II, the largest. You had nurses, but the nurses were not considered as part of the Women's Army Corps. These units had an operational mission, meaning it wasn't a medical mission. So that's one piece of it. And then the second piece, the literacy levels. If you look at the World War II literacy levels post Depression, less than 40% of the US population had high school diplomas. But these Black women, all women had to have high school diplomas. And then for the 6888, you had 85% of these women who had master's degrees or college degrees. They were ex school teachers. They were handpicked and they were the best and brightest in the nation. The most recognized one is Charity Adams. Kerry Washington is playing Charity Adams in the Netflix movie. 26-year-old graduate student who led this unit of 855 women. She was considered a battalion commander, and that's a battalion size element. In today's military, in the Army, a battalion commander has been in the military about 18 years. 16 to 18 years. Charity Adams had only been in the military about 3.5 years when she took command of this unit. At the end of the war, she was a lieutenant colonel. Now, why is that a big deal? Because of gender discrimination, it was still the Women's Army Corps. There was only one '06 position or colonel's position. I retired as a colonel. If you watch Hogan's Heroes, Colonel Klink, you hear the name. Who was the guy who was in charge of the Hogan? He was a colonel. They wear eagles, so that's one level before you make general. So for women, there was only one colonel's position, and the next rank before colonel is lieutenant colonel. Charity Adams retired as a lieutenant colonel. Not only was she one of the highest ranked women um, in the armed forces during World War II, she was the highest ranking black woman. So fast forward, because of our grassroots efforts, we got another piece of legislation through Congress, a post office renaming in Buffalo, New York. We have a military base renamed, rededicated for Charity Adams when the Confederate names are replaced in the military of these installations. Fort Lee, named after Robert E. Lee, deemed the patron saint of the Confederacy, that military installation is now Fort Gregg Adams. So we have a monument at Leavenworth, we have movies, and we have a Broadway bound musical. I'm the historical consultant. But the 6888, I'm giving the background of how impactful that story is. The 6888 is only a slice of the black women who served in uniform during World War II. And as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I saw the series Erase, narrated by Idris Elba, about troops of color during World War II. He mentions black men and women of color, but there was not one woman of color mentioned in that series. And we have the 6888 receiving the nation's highest honor, the only military women's unit to ever receive that award, beginning, since General George Washington. And yet, and still, when World War II history is talked about, black women are an afterthought, and even women to a point, because they're always, you look at the movies, the series is always the damsel in distress, the woman who is waiting for a man, but there's never been a history about black women's military service during World War II. The women were some of the most intelligent in the nation because of the literacy levels, served throughout the US. And a lot of these women had fascinating stories, within, themselves. If you look up Martha S. Putney, she used the GI Bill and got her PhD and taught at Howard University. Dovey Johnson, she became a civil rights lawyer. And you hear in the press how the black troops, a black service member, didn't use the GI Bill, didn't get the benefits. It's hard to navigate the educational and housing benefits now for the VA, but most of these black women, when they left the military, they went on and got PhDs and master's degrees and just made such an impact in the community. So that's one slice of it. Now I talked to you about the 6888. The other piece is, you heard about what happened to black men, how they were beaten in uniform. Isaac Woodard was blinded, and that, prompted Harry Truman to pass the legislation to integrate the armed forces. You had black women in the United States who were beaten, spat on, put in prison, court-martialed for standing up for civil rights. Rosa Parks worked at Maxwell Air Force Base, and you can look this up as well. There's a sculpture to her at Maxwell as a seamstress. She rode the bus around Maxwell Air Force Base and said, "Hey, why can't I do this outside the gate?" So you had a group of military women, to include 600,000 black Rosie the Riveters, who freed these men up to go to war, at the forefront of civil rights. And I had a passive knowledge, but for the past, almost 7, 8 years here, I really dug deep into the research about the black women who served during World War II, who were at the forefront of civil rights. And there's one case where these black women were beaten and in a bus station, put in jail, and it got the attention of NAACP and this lawyer, Robert Meang. And if you look him up, Robert Meang was one of the work with Thurgood Marshall to craft Brown versus Board of Education. He was Hugh Hefner's attorney as well. So you just have all these intersectionalities, these powerful stories. At the foundation of it all is black women. You see the Rosie the Riveters with the bandanas and 5 million. There were 600,000 black Rosies. But these are type of stories that are untold, unknown, and they're just gradually making their way um, to mainstream media. And if just hashtag 6888, the number or the word, and I asked Kevin if you put my name in, Edna W. Cummings, in the um, in your search engine, you'll just see all the stories and the coverage. We're learning that a lot of the women, just like a lot of the troops in the during World War II, were multi-ethnic. The 6888 had women from Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, um, and depending on your skin color, some of the women could pass for white. Some like the Puerto Rican women. Um, Oprah Daily did a story about Crescencia Garcia from Puerto Rico. She came to the U.S. She was light skinned. It was in the summertime. Excuse me. She was fair in the winter, dark in the summer because of her tan. She was with the black unit in the U.S. And then when she went overseas, she was light enough to pass for white. They put her with a white medical unit. So these little nuanced histories and stories, I just think be a great opportunity to have a larger platform. And I just kind of scratched the surface, um, but I write sometimes. I'm contributing author for the Afro American newspaper, and some of these articles, if you just put my name in again in Afro, you see some of the stories. For an example, there are over 9,000 graves in Normandy, American Cemetery. We just celebrated 80th anniversary of D-Day. 4 women are buried in Normandy. 3 are black women from the 6888 who were killed in Rouen, France, um, during in a vehicle accident. Normandy American Cemetery, and although this is not related to women, there are 135 black men buried in Normandy. But nobody ever captures that part of our history in a way and integrate it into the mainstream narrative of World War II. They are now Montfort Point Marines. You only knew about the Tuskegee Airmen. But under the broader context, my focus is black women because those stories are not being told as part of mainstream narrative of World War II. So I'll stop now. I think I've kind of given you the synthesized version of a vision that Kevin is pulling out of me. So you are with the right person because he asked me, "What's your wish list?" a couple of days ago. I didn't have one because getting legislation through Congress, has less than a 5% chance of passing. Um, that was my wish list a few years ago. But President Biden signed the legislation a couple of years ago, and I was great. But their continuing interest about World War II, Black women's service, I've been forced to think, what else can we do to get this story and to continue the discussion, to broaden discussion, because Netflix, I'm sure I'm not involved with that project. It'll be a historical fiction. It's a docudrama. So I want a nonfiction piece um, with the family members. I work a lot with, a lot of the family members, and the Afro American newspaper is one of the newspapers involved in the Double Victory campaign. And that publisher had a daughter who was in the 6888, and she wrote articles about her time in France. So it's just so much rich history that deserves to be told, and maybe this is a platform and a way to get it done. So I'll stop now.
Wow. I think you I think you have to almost stop because I'm overwhelmed. I don't know
Right.
um I don't know what to say other than um I put everything that I heard into the chat box in terms of links. Edna, if you can just check those links that I put into the
Okay.
chat box to make sure that a good I've got a good collection of the thoughts reflected
I
in these links here.
Yeah, I
Uh,
only see the otter so far. Um,
oh,
not
you don't see, okay, so it should be my, oh, wait a minute. Why is
Cummings. I
that?
am an AI assistant. Yeah.
Okay, so those are, okay, yeah, I guess my AI assistant's taken over my chat. So inside of those AI autopilot, I won't do that in the future because I wanted the chat to be interactive. But if you, I think it is still interactive, but if you click on those links, those should be the links that connect back to the things that we want to research to figure out how we can put all these assets into one place. Um, I've had a couple people join the call who have not met each other, but are part of our effort to try and assemble um, a consortium of talent that could start to think about helping people like you, Edna, um, create the first steps or a step in taking all your assets and managing them in a way where we can start to figure out what could we do strategically to put them out there into the marketplace of ideas, thoughts, or content that could be consumed by someone. We know we've been talking to the Department of Defense, the Office of Secretary of Defense, DIOMI, about
Uh,
yeah, about those opportunities to take some of these untold, unsung heroes and put them out there. But you asked the question, what's next is really what we like to know from you. What would you like to do next if you were to prioritize how we could help you?
yeah. As I mentioned to you a couple of days ago, my just really shaping the story. I would like to see a nonfiction 4 to 5 part series about Black women who served during World War II. Black military women who served during World War II and their impact on civil rights.
Right. And as we discussed, I like the idea of something historic, authentically historic, that could be more um, representative of the things that would provide some documentary, some validation, some research, but could be again more in the entertainment compelling realm as opposed to documentaries because we know there's a certain segment of information and history that goes to die when you put it on PBS or
Yeah.
some of the other documentary distribution channels. Um, in a perfect world, where would you like to see this project land? I mean, do you have any ideas on
hmm
where this could, become a destination for?
Well, speaking with, you're not the first, studio. Well, not necessarily studio. I've been approached by production companies, and I've had similar conversations. And I thought it'd be great for like Nat Geo, History Channel, Discovery, but I was told that these channels, very succinct terms, want male lead stories. Apparently, military women is not something that their audiences are interested in. So that being said, if those networks are not interested in women, and if they're not interested in women, and I'm sure they're not going to be interested in Black women, um,
Hmm.
we would have to go to a streaming service, I would think. A series kind of like the Bridgerton, or something like that. Some of these series, I enjoy, but a nonfiction, of course, and I understand it has to be entertaining. But if those, based on the feedback I've received over the past couple of years, a series on one of the historical type channels just probably wouldn't do well because they cater to their audiences. Um,
Okay.
I've worked with the Smithsonian before. I mean, they've done some great work about the 6888. So if you look up 6888 Smithsonian or 6888, Smithsonian Edna Cummings, I've done podcasts with them. I mean, we have the 6888s in the African American Museum. We have a museum exhibit now at Fort Gregg Adams. So the story is out there, but it's not really accessible to the masses. Traveled overseas a couple of times, with the U.S. Embassy in London, and then with Steve Ambrose, the kind of like the godfather of World War II. I presented at the World War II Museum, so it's getting out there. But what I'm thinking and hoping is that with this Netflix movie that's coming out, usually that starts, I call it the copycats, and people want to know more and dig deeper, and maybe similar to the Smithsonian, the true story of the 6888 or the broader story of Black women who served during World War II or something like that. So probably a streaming service would be better. Seems like you have more creative license with streaming services than you do some of the networks.
Right. And I'm going to say one more thing, and I'm going to open up for any suggestions or comments. One of the things that I was really interested in looking at what your inspiration for a dramatic representation of the women would be source material. And some of the things that I think about are the books that have been written by people either who were in the units or had published these stories. Have you taken a look at all of the
Yeah,
different books out there
I have.
and
And
looked
there are
at?
only one or two. One is, and we cannot use it's a source because it's Charity Adams' One Woman's Army is the best reference. There's another one about this. It's more of a thesis, and it's nothing new. It's secondary source stuff from this professor at Buffalo, but there's not a whole lot of nonfiction. Everything else is just a recap. What I've used are actual documents that kind of disproven a little bit um, from some of the content that's in the so-called the nonfiction space because I've got information from their families. For example, here's a sample. I don't know if you can see this. Uh,
Yeah, it's kind of the filter's kind of blurring it out.
yeah, okay. Yeah, my filter. It's called One Negro Wax Story from the Army Women's Museum. It's a 40, 30, or 40 pages. No, not even that. It's about 20 pages of a lady who was in the 6888 and she wrote about her time and it's been buried for a while and she was one of the she also wrote poetry, but she fills in so many of the gaps that was omitted by some of the researchers because a lot of the information that the 6888 women shared, they couldn't share only so much because they were in a very sensitive mission because mail contains troop information, troop movement. So a lot of these veterans, like the men, they could not talk about their service. We were learning about black cryptographers and code girls and all sorts of black women who supported the war who could not talk about their service because they were had a military security clearance or a vow to secrecy. So these stories are now coming out firsthand reference and not secondhand reference. Some oral histories. Uh,
Right.
and that's from
Wow.
the records of the families, like 16888 veteran. This is you want to find this stuff in books. Worked with the Manhattan Project in Buffalo, New York, and we still have her non-disclosure agreement in terms of where these women came from. You're going to see them portrayed as scrubbing floors and hopeless and desperate women before they joined the military. If they were scrubbing floors, it's because they didn't have job opportunities, not because they weren't educated. So it's a shift in the narrative that I would like to see, because that's rather frustrating when I read some of these articles from journalists. There is a stereotype that's perpetuated that's not accurate.
Wow.
So the
Okay.
nonfiction books, One Woman's Army by Charity Adams is the best source. Because she was the commander. Um,
Okay.
2 days, just let you know, 2 days ago, I got a message from the U.S. Postal Service. I submitted a proposal through the Army Women's Foundation for a stamp. So now, 2 years later, the stamp is moving forward through the Stamp Advisory Committee for a stamp for the commander, Charity Adams. So I call it the trickle effect. So we plant the seeds, now they're growing. But yeah, to your point, yes, I mean, I'm over the past almost 8 years, I've been doing this, doing the research, fiction and nonfiction, and there's only about one or two books I would really consider, you know, as a reference. Um, I use the newspapers a lot because these black journalists were there, thanks to the Afro, sent 7 reporters overseas to cover the war. So that first hand account from these journalists who were there. None of these authors, except for Charity Adams, even been to Europe to do the
Mm.
research. So that's the problem I have with a lot of that. Somebody who was there, I've been there. And as I mentioned, I'm working at the University of Virginia on my memoirs that include a lot of my approach and styles to become, this advocate for the 688 and Black women who served during World War II.
Wow. Okay. I've got some more thoughts, but I wanted to open up for anybody
Yes.
that has any questions, suggestions, or comments because
Mhm.
we're short on time, and I really wanted to make sure that we introduced Edna, Colonel Cummings, to our group. Any
Thank you.
questions, suggestions, or comments thus far? If not, then I've got a couple more.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say, Colonel Cummings, thank you so much for your time. This is just the history that you're sharing with us is phenomenal. And if we do have an opportunity to go ahead and, as for instance, put some sort of a documentary together, it is a story that I just know people want to hear. I mean, obviously they're already doing things. Obviously you're saying with the film and some other avenues, but moving forward with this, I think would be, especially in these times, it's imperative that we're sharing these type of stories. So again, I have a background in documentary filmmaking, and I think that is a phenomenal story to go ahead and do. So, but I just want to thank you for your time today. I really enjoy hearing the history that you're sharing with us.
Thank you, Sergio. Um, and if nobody else has any such suggestions, I wanted to represent the group that I've assembled here. Everybody here, I've asked to come on for a reason. One of the things that we're doing with Expedition right now is we're really focusing on um, a couple of things that are not really, they've been segmented, but we're trying to put them together in ways where we can, really have some potential implementation, policy, and law looked at for the problems and the gaps that they create. And the area that we're really kind of deputized at right now is workforce. And again, having these historical facts or factoids to introduce the racial component of workforce is what we're going to be doing in some convenings. And these convenings are more of futuristic ways to try to look at some of the things that we have to attack in the time that we have, to look at resources and strategies to do that, not just throwing money at the problem. So part of our workforce strategy is to do things that um, have brought us all together. Our apprenticeship program is really to get these people, young and some not so old, coached up, trained up, certified, so that we can introduce them, if not
Hey,
to.
hey, watch out, man. You don't got to call us a kind of old, man. Hey.
No, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about me. Because I'm still learning. I'm still learning, but really, we're here to try and figure out what we can do to put a creative agency together that showcases our skills, knowledge, and capability to take stories, content to the marketplace in ways where it can be, again, smartly consumed by all the people who need to know about this information for a myriad of different purposes. But one of the things that I definitely wanted to do is to ask a couple of people in the call with the time we have left to introduce themselves for how we're going to try this creative agency model to try and take some approaches to helping us help someone like yourself put this stuff into format so that it can become developed in a way where it could be pitched to somebody, either for funding or for distribution or some other, again, consumption. So Ed Bernard, are you capable of just saying hello for a few minutes and talk a little bit about some of the things we've mentioned with the agency that you represent?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Good morning. Sorry I'm late, Kevin. I didn't see that invitation until a little bit later. And
I know it was impromptu. It was absolutely impromptu.
Okay. All right. Cool. Cool. So, and I'd like to piggyback on what was just mentioned about Colonel Cummings and what she's trying to do and put together to give some recognition, real recognition, and put clarity to what was the real experience, African American men and women, the real experience, and from our own voices, which a lot of times, if it's second or third hand, unfortunately, it's painted with a broad stroke, broad brush, and then also it's always kind of the stereotypes creep into the story. So I love what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. What Kevin and I have talked about, I basically work with an agency called Code Switcher. My background is I've done a lot in media and live event production. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife of a career. But mostly I'm a producer now. I'm an executive producer, and it's on the corporate communication side primarily. So we do a lot of creative ideation for events. What the journey will be for people that attend an event. We help ideate on media to communicate whatever the messaging is for various events. But I've done a lot, and Kevin and I are talking about ways potentially that we can connect, Dakar potentially with our agency, so that then we can, stories like yours, we could try to find a way through our networks, joint networks, to see if we can kind of bring them to life. I'm sure we're going to have to talk more about it later, Kevin. But
sure, yeah. Well, yeah, and I'm going to ask one other person, but I've got several stories that I'm passionate about. But one of the things that I'm learning how to do is get smarter about what can be a path to getting more credibility in the areas of introducing ideas, concepts that are connective tissued. And I believe Colonel Cummings has more assets than I currently do for all the things that I'm passionate about, which is the African American military timeline. And so I said, well, no, I'm going to, make sure I create a lane for trying to figure out what we can do to hear about how your vision could be something we can work on in parallel to some of the other things that we've pitched to people that have been more documentary. We haven't really pitched any full feature length movies or TV series to anybody, but we're still trying to figure out how to document and verify all this information into some interactive timeline that could be available for researchers to do projects that could be anything. And so one of the things that we're doing is to try to figure out how we can use some of the emerging technologies into how to make these stories more not only reachable to schoolhouses and to anybody, but how to make them more compelling using things like XR, AR, VR, AI, volumetric capturing, and all these things that we're starting to play with in terms of tools. And so one of the people I asked to come under the call was Valerie. And Val, if you can tell a little bit about yourself and how maybe we can use some of your tools to create some momentum or movement where we can bring in some technological partners. Love to know.
Thanks for the introduction. So I'm Valerie. I'm the CTO of Storyfile Admits. probably most of the people on this call on previous meetings. I think where I'm interested in joining this conversation is how we can sort of blend traditional production, documentary productions, with some of the new technology, interactive AI, conversational video, which is what we do, in order to make them really more immersive, effective syllabi for classrooms and things like that. We have done some experience in the past doing interviews with World War II, with veterans. We've interviewed one 6888
Right.
veteran
Davis.
in the past in conjunction with the World War II Museum in New Orleans. So I'm really interested in as we push the conversation forward, how do we maybe blend elements of new technology in with existing production, and how do we, from the training perspective, which is what Kevin does, how can we incorporate students and apprentices and have a training component to train people in new technology, and get them involved in this entire production process. So that's all I would have to say. I'm not going to take more of your time.
Right. Okay. And just something to noodle on. We're going to be trying to push all of these chips to the middle of the table for some opportunities to do some oral history. We have some cameras, we have some software, we obviously have the talent, but we're going to try to create a way to use all these assets to start doing some interviews with people about why this is important to us. Before anything, I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk about their role or their interest in being part of something we want to document. So we're looking at doing a series of 5 different convenings that connect to workforce with the state of California, actually from the top down, from the federal government to the state to the county to the cities of Los Angeles. And we have one venue that we are trying to book. It's American Legion Post 43 in Los Angeles. It's next to the Hollywood Bowl. And that could be a venue where we can do some of our principal photography using some of these top cameras, and be able to introduce the concept of how we can get people to really talk about what they can bring to the table or what they would like to integrate into the energy of this project. I think a lot of people like to be on camera in Hollywood or in LA. And we certainly like to think that the right people being invited to these opportunities would help to put us on the map. So if July 15th becomes available, we certainly like to try to figure out a way to get you out here to LA.
Yeah. Well, this July, I'll be at Huntsville, Alabama. The Missile Defense Agency has a conference, and then I'm going to the George Bush Center after on the 18th of July because they have a program where I speak, to their students,
Mm-hmm.
a veterans leadership program. So unfortunately, I'm already booked for the middle of July.
For the middle of July, okay. What about later, like the week of the 25th through the end of July?
I'll double check.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
Yeah,
things that
let
we're
you
going to
know.
do, yeah, we have some wiggle room, but we have to deliver some of these events by, I think, July 25th or 26th. So there could be a way for us to still, merge all these lanes together, because at the end of the day, time is waiting for no one. One of the projects we were trying to capture an interview with a gentleman. I was part of a fraternity of men who served in the military, but also Hall of Fame athletes. And one of the people we were trying to interview, he just passed away, Willie Mays, on Wednesday. So we realized that, young, old, or, in between, time is of the essence right now. So these interviews are critical. And it's almost impossible to really get the kind of quality of what we're doing on virtual productions. I mean, it's something we can do, but I think if we're going to use some of these cinematography cameras and some of the software, we really need to do the interviews in person. So just something to be thinking about. If we can get you booked out here to LA. That's where all of our production assets are. We'd love to try to think about that. So when you get a chance, look at your calendar for the for post July 18th and see if there's any way that we can actually put our resources together to get you out here.
Yeah, and what is your time frame by July 26th?
Yeah, well, I think it's July 25th. That's the last date that we're supposed to be delivering these town hall meetings. And in addition to interviewing, I'd love to be able to even think about putting you on the program. General Bray and I had a conversation with some people from workforce from the Economic Development Department, and we talked about veterans as part of what is not being successfully done is to be able to have a lot of resources for veterans who are currently in crisis right now, not just with workforce, but just housing, mental health issues, and the whole bit. And the goal really is for this program is to put people into economic opportunities and put them to work. But we still don't want to lose the opportunity to look at resiliency and all the other things that need to help understand what veterans have been to this country and need. So having a keynote speaker, especially from a woman's perspective, would be absolutely just priceless for, I think, the folks in the state of California who don't have a lot of military installations out here, but need to know that, you know, again, it's a part of the fabric of American participation in helping our freedoms that we don't really quite understand here in California as much.
Yeah. And one of the 6888 veterans, she was biracial, black and Mexican. Her daughter lives in Inglewood, and I think we've done something in that American Legion because that we had a couple of advocates out there to help us. Um,
Wow. Okay.
so yeah,
Well,
Rosenda Moore, I can,
well,
I can
yeah. I
go.
mean, she would be great,
Yeah.
but she would not be a replacement for you.
Right.
But she would. We definitely. Yeah. But
But
we
yeah, she
definitely.
talks about her mom. But I was just thinking in terms of
Yeah.
because as you were talking about what I had a conversation actually with the SecDef's wife at an event, Secretary of Defense Austin's wife. We were talking about the image of the broken veteran. And that's all you see. Veterans are never doing well. You hear veteran, people like, oh my God, are you doing okay? And then for women, there's automatic assumption, military sexual trauma, and it's based on a stereotype from the media that everybody's a GI Jane, and with the Demi Moore thing, and you're just this empty person wandering who's looking for love. You're a damsel in distress. I mean, it's never someone who's empowered, comfortable. The patriotism and pride comes after you have healed because
Mm,
it's that broken. I mean, you hear veteran, that's the first thing you think. Oh my gosh, they're all, poor thing. Nobody's ever doing well. We call it the broken veteran syndrome and breaking. And yes, but veterans represent society. Society is broken. You have broken people in all aspects of the community or the population. But we just had this conversation about the stereotypes. And for me, it's, as a woman, some of the things I've encountered um, once I transition, and it's based on the media. So a little grace and courtesy when we're talking about women veterans. We're not all rangers jumping out of airplanes, so
wow.
choking people out when we get upset.
Well,
So
wow.
anyway,
Renee, I don't know if you can talk to us, but there's a big veterans symposium for the
yeah,
state of California. The California Community Foundation is putting
right,
together a symposium for veterans who are currently in community college and four universities,
yeah,
July 30th. And Renee invited me to, I'm going to that event, but it's really to try to break some of the stereotypes for job
yes,
hirers to look at veterans as more than, again, a set aside.
yeah.
And there's a lot of talent that I think a lot of people don't understand how to evaluate these
Exactly. The
people.
profession of arms is a broad skill set.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. So
Absolutely.
we're gonna talk about that is one of the things. At least I'm going to be talking and advocating for that to be part of our modality to look at bringing the veterans unmet needs into the focus. So let's talk about next steps. I will talk to you privately. I think everybody's jumping off right now because they have to. But Colonel Cummings, thank you again for your
Thank
time,
you.
energy, and I'll be
Thank
sharing
you.
this with some other people. And again, thank you everybody for joining the call at the last second.
I
Okay.
appreciate nice meeting everyone.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay. Oh my gosh, Kevin.
What?
Thank you. This was wow. Let me hop off this for a moment
Yeah,
and
okay, let's
yeah,
close
let's
this out.
call. Okay.
All right.